Hey guys, I'm Ty from Biotopia. A number of you may know that I've got a book in the works at the moment, Aquatic Habitats Inspired by Nature, which is a book setting up how to create biotope aquaria and make them look beautiful. I'm doing that in collaboration with my friend George Farmer, who's doing the bulk of the photography work. We've got various sponsors involved. And I wanted to give you a bit of a sneak preview of some of the tanks that I'm setting up for the book. Give you an idea of the kind of style, some of the equipment that we're using. So our tanks are all provided by Wio, which is a Spanish company, and they also sponsor the lighting for the project. So for instance, here we've got a Wio Vistas 120p. I'm going to show you guys a shallow model we've got as well. And we're using these amazing bamboo lights on this tank. They're really good for plant growth and also creating very moody atmospheric ambience. We're using these light ground panels from the Polish company, the Light Ground, with color foils. So in this case, I've used it to create a tannin stained effect, that tea stained color that we see in many tropical habitats. What we're trying to do is not show too many of the tanks that we're working on before the book comes out late next year, but I think it's only fair to give you guys a taste of the kind of things we're working on. So the tanks I want to show you today are actually quite simple. They might be large, but anyone can do them. So this is a Pantanal wetlands lake biotope. It's based on habitats that I've seen in Brazil, where you have these great big floodplains, which are mostly grassy savanna, but also fragments of forest, lots of streams, some bigger rivers, lots of ponds, lakes. And in the wet season, this whole habitat becomes flooded. Many small and big fishes move out of the main rivers and into the flooded landscape, and they end up in seasonal ponds and lakes, which will dry up in the dry season. And if the fish don't retreat with the waters back into the river, they can become stranded and many of them will die. But it means that in the wet season, many of these habitats are really bursting with life. Loads of fish, lots of birds predating them, lots of amphibians. And I wanted to give a sense of that really diverse and full kind of habitat. So this is what I've done here with this lake habitat. All the fish in here are pretty easy to get hold of. I'm trying to mostly use fish that you can find in most good shops. We've got Corridorus aeneas, which is a really popular catfish that if your local fish shop doesn't have it, it's not worth going back to that shop. We've got some poplar sternum catfish, there's a chunky one down there, searching for food. These are really characterful fish. I love both of these species. They're really endearing, they're quite cute, and I can just watch them for hours. You can see the corals just kind of foraging around. We use lots of floating plants. This is really important for a number of reasons. One, it provides shelter for the fishes. In the wild, they will hide under these plants to avoid being predated by birds, but it's also where they will find a lot of their food. Many insects will be moving around on top, and the fish will be stalking them from below. It helps to diffuse the lighting, create this nice ambient effect. And also, it acts as a biological filter. So we've got our two species of catfish in here, and then we've got tetras. There's no cichlids in this tank. There are species you could put in, but I've gone for tetras. When I'm writing the chapter about each display, I explain how to set up the tank. There's sort of 6 or 7 step-by-step photos. You start from the bare tank, adding your substrates, your decor, your planting, and then there's the species list with information about each fish. And then there's also an alternative species list, so that other species are suggested, which you could use in each of your displays. I then write about the habitat upon which that display is based. So in this case, I would be writing about the Pantanal wetlands, I would be writing about that flood pulse cycle, so that not only could you set up this tank, but you would understand where the fish and plants come from, how they fit together, what the dynamic of the biotope of the habitat is. And I'm also going to be writing about many of the environmental threats that those habitats face. So, say you're really interested in the Pantanal, you love these fish that come from the Pantanal wetlands, you want to recreate a slice of those wetlands in your living room, but hey, those habitats are disappearing due to intensive soy farming, cattle ranching, deliberate burning to clear areas for farming and agriculture. Lots of, unfortunately, agrotoxins going into the waterways. So I'm trying to raise awareness about this whilst showing people how amazing these fish and plants and habitats are. So I mentioned tetras. Well, there are 3-4 species in here, I think. The bulk of them are made up of the little sedge tetra, Hyphosobricon elakis, which is a delightful little fish. It's pretty available these days. It's become very popular. They stay small. The males have these lovely long fins, and they flare them up at each other. The females get a beautiful sort of green malachite sheen to them, and they have this little electric blue light around the eye, which is just gorgeous. I've complemented them with a few Hemigrammus acellifer. Now this is a species that isn't actually found in the Pantanal, but its cousin, Hemigrammus neptunus, which looks identical, is found in that region. So I've used the Amazonian version as a substitute for the Pantanal version, which we simply cannot get. And I do that throughout the book. There will be species and plants that, for whatever reason, can't get hold of them, or they're not quite right, and I substitute them. And I think it's very important to show that you can be flexible when making your biotopes. The worst thing in the world is for someone to give up on a project like this because they can't find the right fish or the right plant or the right soil. There's always a workaround. It might not be the 100% pure, authentic biotope, but if the fish and the plants are happy, it looks natural, you've achieved your goal. The other tetra in here is the red-eye tetra. So this is another substitute that I've used. Here we have Monkhausia sanctophilamene, which is known from the Amazon region. The version in the Pantanal is Monkhausia foresti. They look very similar, and so I've used the Amazonian versions in here. They're currently skulking up under the plants here, which is exactly what they do in nature. When I'm out in the Pantanal doing field work, doing photography, this is where I would catch these fish. Often with a panning sieve, we put them under the plants, lift them up, and you find loads of small tetras in there. The final tetra species is one of my favorites, which is the Rathbun's tetra, Aphiocarex rathbuni. Beautiful red and green colors on them. They're darting around in here. They're really good at sort of picking at little bits of detritus and algae on your plants. They can almost be part of the cleanup crew. The bulk of the planting here is floating plants, and I've used a number of species which are biotope correct, and 2 that aren't, but this is how it goes. So we've got the water lettuce, the pistia, up here. We've got Salvina natans, Salvina auriculata, I think, and Philanthus fluitans, the red root floater, all species that are found there, along with Amazon frogfit, Limnobium levigatum, which is another species I find out there. We've then got some Pontidaria cordata, these really tall bog plants here, which produce beautiful flowers if you give them lots of light. And they're typical of the region. So the one plant I really wanted to use is Icornia, which is the water hyacinth. In the UK, that plant is banned. We can't get it. We're not allowed to import it. It's considered invasive. This is an issue that comes up in a number of the displays. Can't get hold of things because they're simply not available in the country. So I've substituted some bog bean, which I've right now forgotten the Latin name of, but it's a European and UK native, and it puts up these triangle sort of leaves up here, and it will eventually develop a dense floating root network very similar to the water hyacinth. The leaves look different, the flowers are very different, but it creates that dynamic of tangled roots and stems and shoots up at the surface. The other species, which is non-native that I've used, are the Nymphaea. In this case, I've used Nymphaea stellata. It's actually a South Asian species. The only Pantanal species that you can get hold of occasionally in Europe, definitely you can in the States, is Nymphaea gardneriana. The other species that I've seen there a lot is Nymphaea jamesoni, which I can't get. So I've had to use a substitute. I've used these Nymphaea stellata. To be honest, they look very similar to the lilies I see out there, and they're performing the same function. They're providing surface cover, they're providing some architectural structure with those stems, and the fish like to move through them and rootle around. Decor is just some big old bits of bogwood pre-sunk in my pond, which simulates what we might see out there in the Pantanal: fallen trees, broken branches, old roots that have sunk or been deposited by the floodwaters and then left to sink down. This tank's really moody, quite simple. The fish are the focus. This is why there's so many of them. We're trying to show this abundance, this incredible richness of species in these habitats. Everywhere you look, there's something going on. The corridors, the hoplobes are foraging around at the bottom. Many of our tetras are hanging out in the mid area. The Aphaeocarax, they like to hang out underneath the plants at the top, picking away at things. I do feed these fish fruit flies, and I put a number of them in earlier, and they're still crawling around on the floating plants, so the fish are actually stalking the flies in some instances. And this is really important. It's the enrichment for your fish, providing stimulation that produces natural behaviors. It shows that your fish are happy, they're healthy, they're hunting for food. We've used some black water extract in here to give it that tannin stain effect as well. It's an acidic biotope, if you like. Very simple, None of these fish are difficult to get. Plants, they're not hard to find. I've used a bit of aqua soil at the back for the lilies, and for the pontidaria over here. Otherwise, I've used Wio's midnight sand, which I really, really like. And it looks like the sort of silty muck that we find at the bottom of these lakes and temporary ponds in the wet season. In the dry season, when the water's full, it cakes into this really hard clay-like mud, and then as soon as the rains come, it softens up and plants burst to life. So I wanted to show you this tank and let you guys get a sense of the scale of some of the displays. This is the largest tank that we're using for the book, this 120p. It's a big tank, and I appreciate not everyone can have such a large display. So we've also got tanks, little 30 cubes, 60 centimeter standard tanks, some smaller shallow displays. So there's a good variety, and this could be replicated in a much smaller tank with fewer fish on a smaller scale, and would still look pretty cool. I should be talking to you, but I'm just watching the fish. The colours on most of these species, apart from the Aphaeocarax, are quite subtle, and that was partly deliberate. There's a number of other species I could have included in here which are a bit more colourful, perhaps. But I wanted it to be a sort of low-key, moody, atmospheric tank with just a few bits of colour provided by the little reference tetras to provide some excitement when you're looking at the tank. Suddenly you see this bright colour come through. I love the way the fish are moving underneath the plants, and they move into the light and then into the shadow, and their body colours change. The fluorescent parts around the eyes glow and then dim depending on whether they're in light or shadow. Corey's just cruising over here, exploring the wood. They're quite happy to move up into the water column because of all this surface cover. They feel secure. If I didn't hold these floating plants, it's likely that the corridors would mostly stay at the lower levels. So I mentioned that there's many other species you could include in this particular display, and that will be written in the chapter. Serpe tetras, Hyphospargonechis, various cichlids, Mesonota, Latocara, Histogramma. There's a host of other catfish that could be included, other tetras such as Hemigrammus ulreyi. You could have the hatchetfish, giant silver hatchetfish in here, although you would want cover glasses to stop them jumping. So that's one of the displays I wanted to show you today. I'm going to show you another one now. I really like this tank. This is the Wio Vistas 120F shallow design. It's a really cool tank. You can do hill stream displays, you can do shallow pools, you can do all sorts of things. I've got the cover glasses on right now because the fish in here, they can jump, and they're quite valuable. They're one of the slightly pricier species that we used in the book. They are the beautiful Phenocogrammus aurantianticus, he says confidently, which are these wonderful Congo tetras from the Congo in Africa. And this is a species-only tank, so I'm only showcasing those fish. The whole idea is that this tank is designed for them, to cater to them. You could put other species in, but given the dimensions, the water volume, I'm keeping just 12 of them in here. They do get fairly large and chunky. I've got lots of filtration on here and Awazi filters. I'm again using 2 of the Weo bamboo lights, and I've been a little flexible in terms of biotope authenticity. The plant in here is Crinum calamistratum, which is actually a West African plant. I could have used Crinum natans, which is a species that's found further into the Congo. But Crinum natans gets really big, very, very large. And this Crinum calamistratum is already large. So I thought, well, they look very similar. This is a plant that is a little bit more manageable, perhaps. It's a big one. I'll use it. And the idea is to simulate here shallow forest stream moving through the rainforest in the Congo. We've got some detritus, some leaf litter, some other botanicals in here. Lots of wood that's perhaps been deposited by the stream. Where the wood has been pushed together by the current, we've got a build-up of sediment and organic material, and that's provided a secure point and nutrients for this plant to establish itself. So the whole thing is about telling a story when I create these displays. Obviously, the Congo is in dire trouble environmentally. I've got a number of tanks from Africa and the Congo for the book, and so I'll be talking extensively about the environmental threats that those areas face. One of the reasons I think that I'll be able to bring readers into the habitat, even to places that I've not been to, is because I have my friends out there. For instance, Thomas Nunesi, who's a good friend of mine in the Congo. He goes out, he takes pictures, he gets information, and he tells me what he's seen. And he is my boots on the ground guy. I have friends in Mexico, I've got friends in Thailand, in areas of Brazil that I don't know, all around the world, people in Australia who are giving me information, photos, data, feedback, their stories and anecdotes, their experiences, and all of this will be woven into the book with the idea that this isn't my biotope book, this isn't Ty's great big biotope book. This is a book which includes the information, experiences, joys, adventures, photos, and data of multiple people around the world. And it's coming together so that you can open that book and go, right, I want to set up a Congo rainforest stream. Oh, actually, there's 3 different tanks here from the Congo. I'm going to do this one. And you can read the first-hand accounts of that habitat provided by the people who are on the ground there. I'm just pulling this information together. There's certain regions that I do know very well, for instance, the Pantanal in Brazil, that I can do with my eyes closed. But although I've been very privileged to travel to every continent except Antarctica, I haven't been to the Congo Basin, so I can't bring you that first-hand knowledge, but I have people who can. This is another blackwater stream habitat, so I've used some JBL blackwater extract. I've got the orange, sort of yellow foil on the back with the shallow custom light brown panel, especially made for this tank, and it gives it that really warm, kind of mysterious effect. The fish have only been in here a little while. This is one of the limitations of the book, is I have to set up a lot of tanks and photograph them and just shut them down and then set up the next batch. So in some cases the fish don't look as colourful, maybe as mature and bedded in as they could. Same with the plants. That's unfortunately a reality. I can't run every tank for 6 months as I'd like to. The majority of them are running even just for a week. That's already quite a long time. 2 weeks is about the maximum that I let them run, because I've got dozens of tanks to produce. So the fish aren't perhaps quite as colourful as they might be. But, you know, give them a few weeks of live food, let them settle in, and they will colour up. These ones, I hadn't even intended, this is my own failure as an overexcitable hobbyist. I hadn't intended to set up another Congo display. I'd done all the Congo tanks. And I walked into a store, and I saw these guys, and I thought, I have to do a tank for them. What could I do? I don't want to use the really big tank, but use the shallow display. Just 12 of them, 1 plant, some manzanita wood, a few botanicals. This is some of the Weo Cimarron sand in here. Create something really easy just for them, just to celebrate these fish. And of course, the readers, they can add whichever species they like. Again, I provide an alternate list. Here are species that you can include, and if that's what people want to do, it's not a recipe book that you have to produce exactly what you're looking at in the book. It's a book that here is an impression of a habitat. this is what I've done with it. You can do the same, but you could also go and develop it, let it evolve. Depending on your resources, you might not have this size of tank. Well, here's a tank from that region, which is smaller. We've got tanks from all over the world, in fact. We've got West African displays, Sub-Saharan Africa, a couple of East African tanks, Rift Lake tanks, Central African. We've got Central America from Mexico and Guatemala. We're going to have a couple of Caribbean displays. We've got South American displays from the Amazon, including Colombia, Brazil, and Peru. We've got South American displays from sort of coastal regions of Venezuela and Guyana, Suriname, French Guiana. We've got Central South American displays from the Pantanal wetlands, from the Marmore Bolivian river basin, in the eastern Brazil, from the San Francisco river basin. We'll have some from the south in the Paraguay river basin, from sort of Argentina, Uruguay as well. We've got some South Asian displays from Thailand, Laos, Malaysia, Indonesia. There'll be displays from Papua as well. There'll be several displays based on Australian habitats. I've done a couple already. There's also going to be a number of several Indian displays and Bengali. And there's a couple of temperate displays in the works. So from the Tennessee watershed in the States and Florida, and potentially one or two others. Depends what I can do. My publishers are being very lenient in letting me go in the flow, but we'll have to see how many tanks we can get into the book, at least in this volume. So we'll see. I'm trying to think if there's anything I've missed out. Presumably so, but I'll come back. And again, the idea is to present a range of tanks, different sizes, perhaps different difficulties in terms of fish care, finding the fish, plants. Most of the tanks have some plants, but they are not necessarily planted aquascapes. I've tried to simulate habitats I've seen in the wild and photos of the way that plants grow in the wild. It's not designed as, here is a tank to do with plants. It's the combination of decor, plants, fish, environmental factors that come together to simulate a habitat. That said, I'm doing the book with George Farmer. I've got a number of other friends, there's Dave Pearce from Aquarium Gardens, who are aquascapers, and they've been teaching me a lot about the way you lay out decor, the way you put your tank together to make it aesthetically appealing as well as authentic. So in this instance, it's a shallow design. I have to have cover glasses on. I can't have things moving out of the surface because these fish can jump. So I've gone with a sort of U-shaped layout with branchy wood, some that way, and then in the center created a mound where my plant is based, so that there's a sort of aquascaping element to it, but you would see, and I have seen, similar compositions of wood and material in the wild. I think I'm talking too much. I'd like to just look at the fish, but they're beautiful. They had some fruit flies actually last night, and they thought they were amazing, so I might give them some later today. They're very happy. They've only been in here a couple of days, and they're very confident, just cruising around. Some people might not like having just one species of fish in a tank, and it could become a bit boring if, that's not your thing. But I think it really gives you a chance to focus your attention on that one animal and all its traits, its behaviors, its beauties, the problems it might give you. These guys are just moving through the roots. Sometimes they go out into the open water. They're behaving as they would in nature, sitting in the current, going up to grab a potential morsel, back into position. Some of the tanks are more biotopy than others, so some of them are very much black water, spindly wood, not very many plants. A couple of them are quite plant heavy. Given the nature of nature and the geographic diversity that this book is covering, there are tanks with lots of rock, lots of wood, some a combination of both, some with nothing, some which are maybe plant-based. There's orange, moody backgrounds, there's brighter green ones, there's crisp blue. There's a whole range of moods and ambiences and vibes. You can pick whatever you like, and if you want to mix things up, mix things up. No one's going to be mad if you want to do your own thing. I'm going to show you one more tank, a slightly smaller one. It's very simple, and hopefully you'll like it. So I'm going to have to get in close for this one, and typically the fish were all just out, which is why I thought this is a good moment to film them, and they've all gone, and decided to hide a little bit. That's okay, I won't bother them for too long. So this is a biotope based on a Sulawesi natural karst spring in Indonesia, on the island of Java. And although they're hiding very effectively, there's a group of Daisy's rice fish in here, which are beautiful, colourful little fish when they're not skulking around in the leaf litter. And I've put them together with some half-beaks. Now, Notoa. I'm not going to risk this Latin name. I'm normally quite good, but I haven't practiced this morning. This particular species of half-beak isn't found alongside these guys, but the species that is, you can't get hold of. And apparently they shoal together, so I've substituted these half-beaks. And they were all having fruit flies for breakfast earlier. In fact, there's a few fruit flies still clinging onto some leaves in here. This is a 60 centimetre Weo Vistas 60p. I filled it only sort of 2/3 full because both these species, particularly the half-beaks, can jump. I didn't want to put cover glasses on, and I didn't want to risk any losses. I wanted to create the sense of forest over this crystal clear spring. So we've got some lianas, some roots in here, which are actually from Escaped Nature shop, not too far from me. And then I've used some pothos, syngoniums, epiprimnums, houseplants basically, to suggest, the jungle is kind of around their habitat. I've looked at some papers online, scientific papers about these fish, and their habitat is 80% shaded by the forest. It's a dense bed of leaf litter and organic material in there, but the water's very clear because it's just come out of the ground from this spring, and they hang around in there, either feeding on insects at the surface or rootling around in the leaf litter, which is what my guys are doing right now. Even the half-beaks that normally sit at the surface decided to go down, which is really annoying, guys. But I've used a dense mixture of botanical products from Tannin Aquatics, so seed pods and leaves and twigs and branches and bits of bark, to create this sense of a forest floor almost, or the detritus from the forest surrounding the pool. And then I've just used some little cable ties to attach the plants to the vines. And I've tried to create a view in that there's a central spiral. So you look at the tank and there's this kind of Pan's Labyrinth-like root window. And the fish, you have to take my word for it, were all happily up at the surface earlier, hanging out under the plants, hoping for fruit flies. And some of the rice fish were down foraging through the leaf litter. They actually really wriggle through it and engage with it, which is great to watch them do that as they're hunting for food. This is a very, very simple display. I've got a couple of houseplants, some vines, some botanical products, 2 species of fish, quite a lot of filtration for this size tank, but I prefer to do that. Anyone can set this up. It's not difficult. There's a number of tanks which are tall, where I've only filled them half or 2/3. This is one of them. They really don't want to come out, do they? They're just going to sit there and humiliate me. I need you guys to be out and about. And you're just, well, that's up to them. A couple of the half-beak males were displaying to each other the other day and sort of flaring their fins and showing off. It's really cool to see. The rice fish were just eating. That seems to be their main concern, getting fed. See if maybe I can get them to engage with a little bit of food. Let's have a look. So I just dropped a bit of food in here, and I dumped some fruit flies. And the half-beaks have noticed they're going up, trying to feed on them. But of course they still just want to hang out in that back corner. Fruit flies are a really good way of feeding your fish. You can buy them from reptile shops, you can buy them online. Almost all small characins, rasboras, anything that lives at the surface, particularly things like hatchetfish and pencilfish, will take them. I tend to feed my fruit flies with some fruit and veg, and this is a way of getting those nutrients into my fish as well. It's also natural behavior. Fish will feed on insects at the surface. I'm giving that enrichment here. The flies, a number of them, will crawl up onto the core, and they will go their own way. Doesn't matter too much. Some of them will hang out in the tank and then fall in later. These fruit flies are obviously bred to be flightless, so that they don't fly away. Sometimes you do get a batch where they've sort of re-evolved to fly, and you open the tub and suddenly there's 1,000 fruit flies in your face. I have my issues about feeding live foods to other animals, but with fruit flies, I allow myself that perhaps slight lapse in the rice fish are thinking about coming out. This is the thing. I put some sinking tablets in there, and then they go down into the leaf litter and hunt for them. So it was interesting to read on ResearchGate an article about this species when it was described and how it was found shoaling alongside half-beaks. I think it's not Nothothalamus in the wild. These fish are really popular, the Daisy's rice fish. They're lovely little things. Oryzirus warware, it says. They've got great colour. I've only ever seen them in shop tanks, though. I've never seen them in an actual display. And it's been interesting to see how they've adapted to this habitat, moving through the leaf litter, wriggling around, exploring, shoveling the substrate around, searching for food. Natural behaviour. It's what they're doing in the back corner where you can't see them right now, of course. Again, I've used one of the light ground panels here with a green to yellow foil. I looked at photos of the original habitat. The water is almost quite blue, but there's so much sunlight being filtered down through the canopy of the forest above the water. It has this greenish, yellowish tinge. So I thought I could try and mimic that here. This is a karst stream habitat, so it's not particularly acidic. It's almost neutral because it's water that's come out of the ground, filtered through limestone, so relatively alkaline, but then loads of organic material from the forest falling into the water, which renders it closer to pH of sort of 7 point something. And that's what I've done here. I want to show you one more tank. I know that the fish are going to probably hide, but I do want to show it to you. Let's have a look. So we'll see if the fish want to show themselves. This is another species display. This is designed and set up for one of my absolute favourite fish, the pygmy gourami, Trichopsis pumila. And this is based on a sort of Cambodian or Laotian swamp habitat. I've got Rotala sp Cambodia in here, which is doing very well. And gouramis, they like to hang out in the back corner, of course, amongst the stems. They do come to the front. I feed them cyclops. I defreeze little bits of cyclops and to pet them in. Hello, are you coming out? You're investigating. These guys are always hunting for food. I love it. They're sort of cruising around. Oh, I moved. Sorry. So like I said, not everyone can have a great big tank. This is a 30 centimeter cube, WEO cube tank. I think most people could handle this kind of tank. There are some limitations in terms of what you can do with a cube tank, but I'm putting a number of them in the book to show people you don't need a huge setup to do something authentic and interesting. Over time, this Rotala will get denser and denser and denser. It's a really beautiful plant. We've got CO2 running on this display because this is a plant that demands it. But one species of plant, one species of fish, and look, they're coming out, he's stalking, he's looking to see if there's anything worth hunting. So there's about 10 or so gouramis in here. They colour up beautifully. The ones I've got are quite small still, and they've only been in here for about a week or so. And this is one of the realities of the book. Like, it's what you set up. If you base your tank on what I've done, what you create is going to look way better because you'll be running it for a longer time. So I've just used a few little liana vines and a little bit of plant soil in the back, and then this Biotope substrate, which I really like. It's sort of reddish. So a bit of black water extract. I did a water change yesterday, so it's not as tannin stained as it was before. These guys can live in a really tannin stained, low pH water. I've got 3 amano shrimp in here, which I just put in just to help clean up a little bit of algae. One of the problems is when you're setting up tanks very quickly for the book, suddenly throw in your plants lots of nutrients, light, CO2, not always sure how they'll react, and you occasionally get bursts of algae. I'm not too fussed. There's algae in the wild as well. I'm running a Wazi Biomaster 350, Biomaster Thermo 350 on this tiny cube. So it's very over-filtrated, but I think that's totally fine. And this is a tank where you have to get up close, but from each side there's something to view. Again, I'm doing several nano tanks like this with small species, and I will suggest alternative species that you could put in. There's many different displays I'd love to set up. Unfortunately, the book can't accommodate all of them. We've talked about having around 50 displays. I've been working my way towards doing about 100 in total, so I'll choose some for this book, and maybe there's a volume 2. I've put a little light ground panel on here, but I haven't put a foil on. I wanted you to see the fish silhouettes and the architectural nature of the stems of the plants. If I did it again, I would probably put an orange foil on, just to give it that tannin stained effect, but you'd have orange plants on an orange foil, which might, look authentic, but could make the display a bit flat. So in some cases I've had to think a bit about the aesthetics of it. Of course, you can do what you want. I've done it this way. Perhaps a shallow, swampy pool. There's quite a bit of sunlight going in, that's why it's sort of quite bright. Plants are growing really well in there. That's the idea. I love feeding these fish because, like I said, they really hunt for the food. So sometimes I give them sort of live Daphnia, brine shrimp, and stuff like that. But even the defrosted cyclops, you squirt it in, they come stalking out, launch at it like the tiny predators that they are. I like these fish that are slightly cryptic. They're not always on display. You have to sit patiently and watch and wait, and then you're rewarded when they come out and show how beautiful they are and show off their natural behaviors. I think in a small tank like that it works really well because there's a lot of expectation out of this tiny cube display. You coming out? Come on, show yourselves. Anyway, perhaps I've talked for too long. At some point when I have another set of tanks set up, I'll do another video, perhaps very different style of the tanks, show you some of the things that are going on. I've been out to Brazil, I came back a couple of weeks ago, so I've got some more inspiration in my head for new displays. And I'll be doing a video about exploring some of the habitats in Brazil. That'll come out soon. But I thought I'd really like to share with you guys what I'm working on and what you can expect in the book, and I really hope that you're excited, that you're interested, and that it's all worthy of your attention and interest. So I will leave you guys to it. I'm going to sit here and watch my gouramis for a while.